Good evening, everyone. Today is Monday, November 1st, 2010. We are at our first official council meeting for the month of November. If we'd all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic, which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And to make this meeting official, I ask Clerk Spencer to call the roll, please.
Gutenkopf.
Here.
Pezza.
Here.
Shea.
Here.
Leader.
Here.
Rose.
Here.
Graham.
Here.
Hipskin.
Here.
York.
Here.
Nybo. Healy.
Here.
Morley.
Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Mulliner.
Here.
Wagner.
Here.
14 present, 0 absent.
14 present, 0 absent. We have an official quorum. And to item number 3 of our agenda, receipt of written communications and or petitions from the public. At this time, if there is anyone that has any written communications and or petitions, if you please rise and present those to Clerk Spencer at this time, that would be great. Anybody? Anybody, any petitions and or written communications? All right. Seeing none, I will now go on to our public forum portion of our meeting. And I would ask Clerk Spencer to see if there is anybody signed up today for public forum.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have several people. Claude Pagash, 566 West Gladys.
My name is Claude Pagash. I live at 566 West Gladys. I'm here in regards to the fact that earlier this year, the city hired 4 consultants to help keep business into this town or bring new business into town. There was discussion by the aldermen that they would give some period of time for these people to work at it and get a report. As far as I know, there's been no public report of what they've achieved, and I do know for a fact, since it was reported in the paper, that Rotec, a $20 million corporation, decided to leave Elmhurst for whatever reason. I surely would like to know what these 4 people we hired as consultants or whatever. There were some aldermen that wondered if there was a real need for it, but we got them. And I surely would like to have some kind of report on what they are doing. Also, I previously made statements about the parking garage. And of late, all I hear is, we got to worry about the people on Metro, and we got to worry about the businessmen's parking, and we got to worry about their workers' place to park. But in all of it, I don't hear too many aldermen saying that, well, the residents are asked to shop in Elmhurst. But since we are providing parking for everybody but them, they will still have to roam the streets to find a place to park. I surely wish the aldermen would take the side of the residents who, unfortunately for them, have footed the bill for these buildings and now are left out of the conversation totally on if and when they will ever be allowed to park in the parking lots. Thank you.
Thank you, Claude.
Liz Widener, 708 Sailor.
Hi, Liz Widmeyer, 908 Sailor. That's okay. I have to say it's not difficult to gain respect. Can everyone hear me okay? It's not difficult to gain respect for our city staff as well as our council. I'm convinced that each of you are making the necessary commitment to the flooding issues. There is a large task, very involved, and understandably moving along a bit slower than we'd all might hope. What is unfortunate at present is the amount of time it took to assemble the task force, only to put them back a few extra weeks because the mayor was unable to attend last week. We need backup plans. We are nearing the holiday season, and in less than 2 months, the flood event will be half a year ago. Since so much time has passed since the summer flooding, I wanted to remind everyone of a statement made by our city manager at a council meeting on August 2nd. Mr. Borchert said, and I quote, "Elmhurst is a wonderful community. It should be wonderful for everyone, and no one should be fearful of a rain event." End quote. This statement was echoed by most of you through the past several months. Bringing you back to July 26th meeting, I wanted to remind you of the Bryan Middle School meeting and a man who stood up and said, "Audience, please raise your hand if you own a generator." As you might recall, it was a pretty stunning result when half or more of the audience raised their hand for owning a generator. I'd be curious to know how many of those people, if we were to ask, how many of you are fearful of a rain event? I'd wonder what the results would be. Council and staff, please prove me right. Show me in the community that it's not difficult to gain and hold the respect that you deserve. Keep the process moving. Do not accept the slowdowns that are currently existing, such as with ComEd. Let everyone know that you are committed until you see that everyone on July 26th can keep their hand down if you were to ask them if they were afraid of a rain event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob Holt, 401 East Niagara.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm here to speak tonight in my capacity as chair of the Mayor's Bike Task Force about two items on the agenda. First, item 5G, a request by Alderman Kennedy for the installation of a pedestrian safety device where the Illinois Prairie Path crosses York Road. Over the past 2 years, the City, Park District, and DuPage County have taken steps to improve the Prairie Path crossings at Berkeley Street and Spring Road. In addition, the state has provided about $250,000 to improve the crossing of the Prairie Path at the Canadian National Tracks. That has not yet started. They are doing the engineering work now. The biking community strongly supports the changes, and the time has come to deal with the crossing at York Road. Second, item 5I. I would like to thank the Public Works and Buildings Committee for their expeditious handling of the license agreement and recommendation to the full council for the placement of a public bike rack on the private property of U.S. Bank. Though this work is small in dollar amount, it represents a public-private partnership that was initiated over 1 year ago between the City of Elmhurst, U.S. Bank, and the York Vallette Business Association. I would make a correction to the agenda packet in that the credit for the purchase of those bike racks goes to the York Vallette Business Association. The placement of these racks will be important for users of the York Vallette businesses west of York Road that can easily be frequented by bike. For example, the Prairie Cafe, Elijah's, Luscombe's, Mama Maria's, U.S. Bank, and New Cara Pharmacy, to mention just a few. Both of these items, 5G and 5I, are important as we continue toward becoming a more bike-friendly and pedestrian-friendly community. I'm also happy to report that today, School District 205 completed the first of 3 steps in their application for a $100,000 Safe Routes to Schools grant. Finally, it is the intent of the Bike Task Force to submit by year's end an application to the League of American Bicyclists for Elmhurst to be named a bike-friendly community so that we might join the other Illinois cities of Chicago, Schaumburg, Naperville, and Urbana. I hope to have more information on that for you at the first council meeting in December. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Earl.
Gene Evans, 225 Chandler.
Good evening. Gene Evans, 225 Chandler. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. I'm the Vice President of the Board of Directors of the Elmhurst Heritage Foundation. The foundation is a non-for-profit organization that exists to support the Elmhurst History Museum and the Churchville one-room schoolhouse. Our work looks to support the educational undertakings of the museum provide financial support for the benefit of the museum, and to serve in an advisory role to the director of the museum and the Elmhurst City Council. The Elmhurst Heritage Foundation has recently started a membership program. This allows citizens and organizations to identify themselves as supporters of the educational and cultural activities of the museum. In the last few weeks, every resident in Elmhurst should have received a packet in their mail outlining the Heritage Foundation membership program. We have made it simple to show your support, including our own dedicated website at elmhurstheritagefoundation.org. This new website, again, elmhurstheritagefoundation.org, contains additional information on membership and some of the benefits of membership, including previews and behind-the-scenes cultural tours of the new events, discounts to special events, and a discount on all museum store merchandise. Coming off the successful grand reopening of the Churchville one-room schoolhouse is an exciting time for this new membership initiative. We invite everyone to join and support and show support of the history and cultural heritage of Elmhurst. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Lozar, it looks like 600 Wall Street, Glendale Heights.
Yes, good evening. My name is John Lozar. I'm the Technical Services Manager at DUCOM in Glendale Heights, and I'm here in support of the BTS Tower conditional use.
Thank you, sir.
Darlene Heslop, 200 North Michigan, number 227, Elmhurst.
I too want to touch on what Mr. Hull did on the memo that Alderman Kennedy brought forth, or the recommendation on item G about the prairie path. But I also want to point out that a year and a half ago, I contacted Alderman Nybo about this exact same crossing and how dangerous it was and how near death it was, and it took somebody really literally getting run over in order for now another recommendation to come forth. Okay, this is a very dangerous intersection because no one bothers to slow down, no one bothers to stop because there's nothing there that makes them do it. There's no police officers, no stop sign, no nothing. And I ride my bike early in the morning, sometimes when it's pretty dark, and I see the runners too who are out there, okay? And believe me, it is unsafe. And I brought this up a year and a half ago, okay? So this time, let's do something about it. Let's do something about that crosswalk. Let's do something so that not only the runners, but the bikers and the walkers and anybody else who's out there in the early morning or later in the afternoon or whatever doesn't feel like they have to take their life into their hands when they're at that crosswalk, okay? And I brought this up. I have the memos all here, Alderman Nybo. I saved them all, okay? So let's do something about this time, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Kenny Kuchenbecker, 279. I can't read it. I'm sorry.
Ma'am, if you could state your address for us, that would be
Yeah,
great.
it's Penny Kuchenbecker at 279 West Armitage, Elmhurst, Illinois.
Thank you.
I'm here to talk about the vacation property at 537 North Walnut. My dad has requested the property there. Elmhurst was putting curbs in about 50 years ago, and Robert Palmer requested that my dad, if he would agree that Elmhurst would not have to put the curbs in, that the city of Elmhurst would give him the property there, the easement. My dad has taken care of the property for 50 years. He's done all the repairs, and I feel it would be in Elmhurst's best interest, as well as my dad, if they would approve the majority report and vote for him to have this property. Thank you.
Thank you.
Charles Meredith, 537 North Walnut.
Yeah, my name is Charles Meredith. I'm from 537 Walnut Street in Elmhurst. Yeah, as my daughter just stated, that Robert Palmer promised me the easement, back in, I don't know, in the early 60s when I moved there. It was all country then, and they never did anything for it, but I've maintained it for the street and the driveway and all since 1967, since they moved, you know, the city moved in and took us in as in the county then. And I think I'm entitled for it, and I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Gail, is that it? Maddie, 9420 South Bell, Chicago.
Thank you. I'm Gail Mady, 9420 South Bell, Chicago, and I'm actually here to help clarify or answer questions regarding the N item, which is the BTS wireless communication tower, not cell tower, but a wireless communication tower. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes our public forum as far as anyone signing in to speak tonight.
Thank you, Clerk Spencer. At this time, I'll close the public forum portion of our meeting, and we'll go on to item number 5, which is our consent agenda. I would ask at this time if there's anyone that has a question, may want to vote no on an item at this time to let me know which item I'd like to pull. Alderman Healy.
Item N is in Nancy.
Item N. Anybody else? Alderman Brown.
P is in Paul.
P is in Paul. And Alderman Shea.
Oh, item O.
Item O.
Nothing's getting out of our committee tonight.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Alderman Gutenkopf.
Item U.
Item U. Okay. At this time, anybody else? I'd ask for a motion and a second to approve the contents of our consent agenda, less items N as in Nancy, O, P as in Peter, and U. Alderman Pezza with a motion, Alderman Wagner with a second. Clerk Spencer, if you can call the roll, please.
Pezza.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Shea.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Rose.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Hipskin.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Nybo.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Morley.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
14 ayes, 0 nays.
14 ayes, 0 nays. The contents of the consent agenda passes, less items N, O, P, and U. And at this time, I ask Clerk Spencer to read the report on item N, please.
Therefore, it is the recommendation of the Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee that the City Council approve this request for conditional use. The City Attorney is hereby directed to prepare an ordinance authorizing the conditional use as presented. Respectfully submitted, Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee, signed by Stephen Morley, Chair, Susan J. Rose, Vice Chair, Norman Leader, Alderman, 2nd Ward.
And at this time, I'd ask for a motion and a second to put this item on the floor, please. Alderman Morley, and second by Alderman Rose. A discussion, Alderman Morley. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick summary of what's happened on this up to date. This came before council a couple weeks ago. There was some concern voiced with regard to the report coming out of the Zoning and Planning Commission. At that time, there was two primary concerns. One was, were there findings as a result of the review of this request? And also there was, I call it a legal technicality that was to be checked on. The full City Council sent it back to the Commission. The Commission did take a look at it, and there is, in everyone's packet, there's a letter from Chairman Whistler and the members of the Zoning and Planning Commission in which they address both the question or concern about findings and also there was a clarification, and they since altered their report as it related to the legalities of the 4-4 split in the past. I would say, as it relates to the reasons why it was sent back to the Commission, I think the findings speak for themselves. As far as the legal aspect, it's both Nick Peppers and City Attorney Storino, along with city staff, feel that the correction meets any concerns, and as it stands, there is no violation of city code. So I believe those issues have been met. I will say that the substance of the request for conditional use was not discussed at the last committee meeting because the findings hadn't changed. It was actually sent back for technical reasons, but the committee itself and our findings hadn't changed because we weren't asked to consider that. So I think the technical issues have been cleared up, but we'll see. And then the other issue would be the basis of this, the request for conditional use. About 6 weeks ago, the committee actually did review this. We reviewed the findings from the commission, reviewing the 7 standards for conditional use, and the committee, our committee, did not find any objection, and it comes out of our committee with full support, and I hope you'll support it.
Thank you, Alderman Morley. Any other discussion? Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason I pulled it from the consent agenda has nothing to do with the merits of the case. I am in support of the majority report coming out of the DPZ. Rather, my issues are with why we had to address this issue for a second time. As I stated a couple weeks ago, or the last time it was before the council when we sent it back to ZPZ, I said it then, I will repeat those comments. It's a complete waste of time. Originally, the concern was that there was no recommendation, that because of a tie there would be no recommendation. At the time when it was before the council, it was asked of City Attorney Storino, what is the practical outcome of a tie at ZPZ, and he responded at that time that the practical outcome was a rejection or a failure of the ZPZ to pass a recommendation. So we get the letter in our packet, and literally all the ZPZ did was republish their September 23rd letter with a revision, and the only revision is to state, due to the tie vote in this case, the motion on case number 10P-09 to recommend approval of the BTS Tower applicant's request for conditional use fails. We were told that night. Then there was a request, well, we at least need findings that were already in the report. So I pulled it because I feel strongly about it. All we did was waste staff time. I see Chairman Whistler in the audience. We wasted ZPZ's time. We wasted DPZ's time by putting this back to them. But most importantly, we wasted taxpayer money, because to get to this point, which we knew back then, we had to pay for legal fees, we had to pay for an attorney to be present at ZPZ. I think it's a waste of time, and it's unfortunate that we could have and should have resolved this issue on its merits at that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Anybody else for discussion? Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe I was the one who made the recommendation to pull this back last time. I honestly, I'm not in agreement with Alderman Healy's perspective on this matter. I don't believe it was a waste of time, because there was concern by myself and obviously others, since it did move forward, by what the actual ordinance stated and what the report and meeting minutes stated. And therefore, I thought that to make sure we are following proper procedure, that any time, even if it takes a handful of hours of our time as well as city staff, to make sure that we're open and transparent, I think it's worthwhile and money well spent. I also want to voice my concerns of this, as well as the third thing, which I'll jump to now, is declare that I do work for one of the, well, I'd like to believe one of the larger network telecom providers, but one of the network telecom providers. I'm declaring that just to be transparent. I have no monetary issues if this goes forward or does not go forward, but I definitely want to be transparent on that issue, that I do work for a telecom provider. This is my expertise per se, so I wanted to make sure that I am open and forthright to the public on that. But there's no conflict of interest due to myself not having any monetary gains whatsoever. My concern on this matter is the height of the tower. And the commission statements of, well, exactly half of the commission at that point, not seeing a benefit to the city of Elmhurst residents. I quite honestly have not seen it clarified in any of the reports, at least to my satisfactory manner, that there's benefits to the city of Elmhurst residents. There's a potential of an indirect benefit since this is Ducom property and the proposal is to lease Ducom property, that those monies would go to the Ducom fund and therefore in the grand scheme of things will keep the Ducom costs down. But I'm concerned about the precedent setting of 140 feet tower in the city of Elmhurst, which there's not one above 100 feet today. So that is my biggest concern, and I didn't speak to the merits of this case last time due to what I deemed was an important procedural issue to make sure we dotted the I's and crossed the T's on that. This is next to the high-tension power lines by ComEd. There is another tower nearby. I believe it was 50 feet in height. But 140 feet is significant in my view. There are residential homes relatively close in the second ward, right off of Grand and Church. So I am concerned about that, and if I may ask for a motion to, or do I need a motion to suspend the rules? To, I guess, hear from the petitioner to answer the primary question that I have is, can this be accomplished by having a shorter tower? I know that cell towers, and I know it was discussed in public comment and public forum, that this is not a cellular tower. This is 4G, which is along the lines of cellular. But a lot of cellular towers are lower. As this states, the Nextel tower next to it is 50 feet high. So if I may ask for the motion to suspend the rules to hear from the petitioner on why a shorter tower cannot be accomplished in this location.
Do you need a motion? He just moved.
All righty. Motion fails for lack of a second unless somebody's willing to second it. Alderman Pezza? Okay. Motion and a second to suspend rules. All in favor?
Wait, can we debate this?
You want to discuss the motion on suspension of rules? City Attorney Serino, can we discuss that? We can. Alderman Nybo?
Well, I mean, I'll chime in. I think it's a bad idea to open up any zoning petition on the dais here after the public hearing is closed, after the committee consideration is closed. On unique circumstances, we have discussed and talked with zoning petitioners. But usually it's because there's been a petitioner standing up ready to supply some information that is clearing up a misunderstanding on the dais, or there is some significant confusion. I think it's bad precedent to start opening up and saying, well, can you get by with a 5-foot variation instead of a 10-foot variation? You know, I mean, I just think we're opening ourselves up to a lot of procedurally difficult situations, so I would not support this.
Alderman Healy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Alderman Nybo. If there were questions about the size of the tower, those questions should have been asked during the original discussion at DPZ, which I don't have the date in front of me, was several weeks ago. I am not comfortable suspending the rules in this instance.
All right, so we'll have to take a roll call vote on this. Alderman Mulliner.
Yeah, I too am a little cautious of suspending the rules as we move forth looking at a committee report. I think the question should be originally proposed to the committee and to see if they have a response to it, because they may have already answered this question, and I believe that's the appropriate
Mr.
place.
Mayor, I'll withdraw the motion.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Second and withdraw? Very good. All right, the motion to withdraw, suspend is withdrawn. And any other discussion on this before I call the roll? Alderman Pezza.
Yes, thank you. I would just like to say I guess I have a different way of thinking that I don't think it's ever a waste of our time to anyone has a question about something, to go back, double check, do extra homework, whatever it takes, to make everyone whole with something. And that being said, that's exactly what I had more time to do. I was a little fuzzy on this because I really always look toward our zoning commission, and they were torn in half, therefore so was I. I said, oh no, how am I going to vote on this? And it did allow me to have even more time to think through this, and one of the things I did not realize was this was owned by DUCOM, and when I learned that prior to the last meeting, I then had more time to understand exactly what that meant. Yes, the tower is taller than most other towers, but where it sits, if you go back to the property, it's pretty remote. It's surrounded by 200-foot other towers, so it'll probably look kind of small next to those. Not to say it is small, it's obviously more than double the allowed height. And I did have time to actually speak to the executive director of DUCOM itself to further understand how, I mean, I know Elmhurst is a part of DUCOM, and we benefit public safety-wise through DUCOM. And I guess the bottom line is, after speaking to Mr. Tegmeyer, it's clear to me, because it was not clear before, that DUCOM owns the property, and the annual rent they are going to take in for the lease on this tower is actually going to trickle down and benefit us. Not in a huge fashion, but it does benefit public safety in general. DUCOM it serves our police and our fire, and therefore, I think if you look at the bigger picture, yes, the tower is taller than what the zoning commission would have liked to have seen, and probably what any of us would have liked to have seen. But I think when you factor in the rest of these facts, I would have to support this, because I think there is actually a benefit to the city, not directly, but more indirectly, and it's also a benefit to public safety. And I know one of the concerns of the commission, it said there wasn't really a benefit, but after some further research, I think there is a benefit, so I could support this.
Very good, very good. Alderman Rose.
To answer the question, no, the tower cannot be shorter. In fact, if you look on page 2 of the Zoning Commission's report, they indicate the petitioner did say that. So not just the commission, but the committee did consider that. So that is the answer to that question. It cannot be done. 2, I just think that while I absolutely respect Alderman Pez's looking to the commission, I also think it's important to look at the deliberations of the committee, that we looked at every word the commission had recorded. We looked at that very strongly. We understood this could not be, and we supported this pretty strongly. So I would urge everyone to support this. There clearly is a benefit to folks in town. I'm not a Luddite, and I would be very concerned if we all began to think of ourselves as Luddites and we can't have a certain level of technology. I think that's what folks in this community expect from a community of this quality. It's in a remote area, and I would urge us to support this.
Very good. Anybody else? Alderman Leader.
In addition to what Alderman Pez has said, which I agreed, and Alderman, I'd also point out that this does not cost the city a dime, nothing. All we have to do is say yes. And for those of us, and I assume Alderman Pez went out there, I went out there, it is in the 2nd Ward, and there will be people in the 2nd Ward, particularly around Barron's Park, who will benefit directly from this. But that's Tower City. Those ComEd lines are 60 feet taller than this proposed tower. So when you're standing there, why, it's like Sequoia. I mean, they're just towering all over you. I had never actually been out there. So that tower we're talking about building is going to have to look up to what is already there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Leader. Anybody else? Alderman Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I do agree with some of the comments made. The one, how do I put this? In regards to this cell tower and what is being requested, and from my background in the area, I was looking for further information. I did not want to speak to the petitioner, I'll say, quote-unquote, behind closed doors, because I think that's inappropriate. I wanted to do it in a public forum, and therefore that was my previous request for suspension of the rules. There are a lot of details here. In regards to coverage area of this technology, I did look on the site of this petitioners to view the coverage area. It did show that it was being proposed to have coverage already prior to this petition. With all that being said, I do agree that the circumstances are, this being by the high tension power lines of ComEd, is something that does need to be taken in consideration. I wanted to speak to my concern. I am not going to move forward, or I am willing to move forward with this petition due to the location and due to those circumstances in particular, as well as some minor revenue sources for DUCOM. But since it was pulled by Alderman Healy, I did want to speak to my hesitation of approving a tower of this height. If it was anywhere else in the city of Elmhurst, I would probably be not for it, but in this case, I'm willing to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. I think we're ready to call the roll. What do you say? City Clerk Spencer, please call the roll.
Morley.
Aye.
Rose. Aye. Graham.
Aye.
Hipskin.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Nybo.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Pezza.
Aye.
Shea.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
14 ayes, 0 nays.
14 ayes, 0 nays. The report passes. As a commentary, I would encourage, and I always kind of say this after the fact, after a vote, I would encourage dialogue between aldermen that have questions and the committees up front, so that we don't have to delay things and put things through extra work, and commissions do extra work, attorneys do extra work. I think a lot of this could have just been handled with a simple phone call. So hopefully in the future that'll take place. And on to item O. It's a report. I'd ask Clerk Spencer to read the report, please.
Therefore, the Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee recommends approval of the Elmhurst Memorial Hospital Phase 3 Final Planned Development Plan and Map Amendment. The City Attorney is hereby directed to prepare the necessary documents for City Council approval. Respectfully submitted, Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee. Signed by Stephen Morley, Chair, Susan J. Rose, Vice Chair, Norman Leader, Alderman, 2nd Ward.
And at this time, I ask for a motion and a second to put this report on the floor, please. Alderman Morley with a motion, seconded by Alderman Rose. And discussion. Alderman Morley, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Okay, let's see if I can summarize this. You all should have received stacks and stacks of information from the hospital to go with the previous stacks and stacks of information that you had already received. I will try to summarize, and then if there's specific questions, I'll see what I can do. But I know city attorneys here is very familiar with it, and also there are representatives from the hospital. But quite simply, and I wish I had the big map we had in council or in committee, but basically what you have is the hospital previously had submitted a plan development that had Lot 1, which is where the main campus is, Lot 2, which is at the corner of Lexington and York, which was a parking lot, although you'll recall it's zoned commercial, but it's a parking lot, and Lot 3, which is zoned the HCC, which is the specific hospital zoning district we created specifically for the hospital. Now, when the hospital makes a change to that, if they're going to make a change, they have to go through and actually request a change to, or to amend the plan development. So in this case, and I don't think this is going to show very well on camera, but I'm showing it, hopefully the people up on the dais can see this. In this case, we're talking about lot number 3 and lot number 1. If you recall, the hospital has, I don't know, over the past 10 years or so, tried to purchase as much of that property as possible. And they got enough where they could move forward, but you had these little piano keys kind of knocked out on their plan where they couldn't necessarily reach an agreement with those individual owners of that property. So as they continue to move forward, they had to change things a little bit as a result of some of the space they were lacking on their campus from those, what I'll call knocked out piano keys. Well, right down here at the bottom, so that would be the corner of Brush Hill and Euclid, the southwest corner of their campus on lot 1, there used to be 2 parcels of land that were notched out down there. And in between the time that the hospital submitted their previous amended plan development and now before significant construction took place on lot 3, the hospital was successful in actually acquiring that little corner of the property. What that has allowed them to do is a couple of things, and that's what they're asking for here. They're asking for some rezoning, so those 2 little pieces of property down there were actually residential. So they purchased those, they want to absorb those into the campus and rezone those HCC, the healthcare campus. To do that, and then they want to make a couple of changes as a result of taking on that property. And that's where the amended plan comes in, which is conditional use, so they have to go through all those motions for that. What they're petitioning for is on lot 3, now this is before it was built, this hadn't been built yet, but lot 3 originally had a detention pond on the west side of the property and had, lot 3 is all parking. So it had a detention pond to hold back some water to make sure, you know, the flooding concerns. And now, as a result of picking up that extra property, what the hospital is petitioning for is that they can actually take that property that's in the southwest corner of lot 1, and right now down there, there is a retention pond, so a pond that stays there year-round with water in it. But right next to this retention pond is the property they acquired. Well, what they're going to do is they're actually going to take that property and create what I would consider, what's considered a detention portion. So they're actually expanding the capacity of the hospital itself to detain water on its campus with the addition of that extra property. As a result of that, the hospital can optimize their parking a little better in lot 3. So basically what they've done is they've removed a detention pond that was there. There's still going to be berms around the entire lot 3. But instead of a detention pond, what the hospital has done is they've re-engineered that parking lot. So if you picture this basically a square with a tooth knocked out of it, they're going to berm the entire thing, but the parking lot itself is going to slope inward, in upon itself, if you will. And in the middle of the parking lot, they have these things they call bioswales. I keep calling them bio-weirs, or bioswales. So basically what that is patches of foliage that actually allows the water from the parking lot to drain into that. It's filtered naturally, and then underneath the parking lot, they've got water pipes that convey that water under Harvard all the way down to this retention pond that is now expanded to have additional detention capabilities. So long and the short of it, that's what's happening. They want to change their plan for parking lot, for lot 3, to increase parking, remove the detention pond with the addition of the property at the south end of their campus. They want to zone that HCC, and with that, they can increase the capabilities of detention on the site. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I hope you'll support the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any other discussion? Alderman Shea?
I just pulled it. I do support this. I just wanted to ask just one question, and I think you just answered it. For lot number 3, you said it's designed to convey the stormwater to the bioswales to the enlarged retention pond. I just wanted to know, is any of the stormwater at all going into the storm sewers? The city storm sewers. So it's all, every bit of the water from Lot 3 is going into those bioswales to the retention pond?
Well, eventually it's going to go to a sewer. I mean, the detention pond, the detention pond, ultimately there is a sewer system on the campus. So ultimately it does go to the sewer. Eventually.
But how much of it? I mean, because isn't that going to just hang,
All of it?
all stay on there, right? Or
Well,
Can I add a real quick question? I think it might be kind of where Alderman Shea is going. Does this change still hit the requirement, the threshold of 1.5, which is the ordinance, which is pretty strict from the county of DuPage?
we did, maybe I should have clarified, we did discuss that at length in committee, and all of the changes that are being proposed meet city standard, meet DuPage County standards. We were provided with data, mountains of data from hospital engineers and city staff engineers validated the data that was provided by the applicant, that it's conveying the proper amount of water to meet all DuPage County statutes.
Very good. From what I remember in the committee, because I was actually there, also, I think it even goes beyond that from what I remembered as well. So we meet the ordinance. Actually, it well exceeds the ordinance, which is, I think, the important thing here, because that's the 100-year threshold that DuPage County measures. So we're not looking for any extra consideration here. So, but I think that's kind of goes to the point that you're trying to make, Alderman Shea. Is that correct? Okay. Anything else before I ask for a roll call? Hearing none, Clerk Spencer, if you please call the roll, please.
Morley.
Aye.
Rose.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Hipskin.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Nybo.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
Pezza.
Aye.
Shea.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
14 ayes, 0 nays.
14 ayes, 0 nays. The report passes. And to item P, which is another report, I'd ask Clerk Spencer to read the report, please.
Therefore, the Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee recommends that the City Council approve the applicant's request for conditional use and associated setback variations. The City Attorney is hereby directed to prepare the necessary documents for City Council approval. Respectfully submitted, Development, Planning, and Zoning Committee, signed by Stephen Morley, Chair, unsigned by Susan J. Rose, Vice Chair, signed by Norman Leader, Alderman, 2nd Ward.
And at this time, it is for a motion and a second to put this report on the floor. Alderman Morley, second by Alderman Leader. And discussion, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Morley.
It appears to me my lucky evening. Okay. What we're looking at here is a couple of things which happens when you have an older community and you're trying to work zoning laws, et cetera, around property that's maybe been there longer than the laws itself. We have an interesting situation here, though. This is an application for a conditional use permit for a pylon sign and also a couple of variations associated with the pylon sign and 2 ground signs. What we're talking about is, what are we going to, York Center Plaza, okay? So that's at the corner of York Road and Crestview. Or to paint a better picture, there's a Holiday Inn up there. Kitty corner to the Holiday Inn is this York Center Plaza. So the applicant is wanting to put up 3 signs to, better direct people to increase business. One of the other things the applicant is trying to do is, if you can see, I don't know if it came with the report. We were supplied with a map. This is basically a schematic of the building itself. And there's almost the equivalent amount of offices on the back side of this building than there are on the front side. And it's ever been a challenge to get businesses to succeed back there. This landlord is trying to do everything they can to be creative, to get people to understand that there's a whole other half of the building that has businesses in it. So, to the heart of the matter, we have 1 pylon sign and 2 ground signs. The pylon sign itself, they want to put at the northwest corner of Crestview and York. There's 2 pylon signs. One's at the south end of the building and one's at the north end of the building. When the committee discussed this originally, it was noted that the reason for the variations in the setback, normal setback is 6 feet, they're asking for a 0 setback, is because of the way this building was constructed and the way the parking lot was actually constructed. There's no setback to begin with. There's a strip of property. If you're familiar with this, it's not like there's much city property to deal with. And the petitioner feels that if they put those signs within their property, they literally put them in the middle of the parking lot. People will be running into them. It's just, it's not an appropriate place to put them. So they are asking for a variance on the signs, which actually pushes them basically to the edge of the parking lot. This is C2, I believe, and it butts up on the northeast side of it, kind of wraps around R1, residential. When the committee first reviewed this, we felt, and I'll let the committee speak for themselves, but in general, there was no issue with the ground sign at the south end of the property. There really was no issue with the pylon sign. We felt they met all the conditions for conditional use for the northwest corner, but there was concern that the small ground sign that was on the northeast side of the property, if you will, the initial proposal was for a sign that maybe wasn't terribly attractive, and the committee asked the applicant and the sign guy to go back and consider a couple of things. Consider the fact that it was directly across the street from residential, and that's going to happen. There's plenty of places in town where you have commercial abutting residential. So 2 suggestions were made. Ultimately, the applicant came back with 2 changes. One is they created a slightly more aesthetically pleasing sign. The sign on that side will not be illuminated, and they also agreed to take the sign where it was and move it about another 20 feet east. By doing that, they accomplish anybody from on the east side of the property looking at the sign, actually they won't be able to see it. It's covered by bushes. If you go out and take a look there, there's bushes on the corner of the entryway that are probably about 10 to 12 feet wide and 10 to 12 feet high. So by moving the sign a little further east, they accomplish that. Secondarily, they try to create a little more attractive sign, and the way they have it positioned, if you're looking at it straight on, the sign itself is perpendicular to the house, the one house that will be able to see it. So it's basically a 4-inch width of a sign. It's green. They made some accommodations, doing the best they could. I believe that it's a pretty good compromise between C2 and residential, and I hope you support it, and I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Alderman. Any other discussion? Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I definitely have concern over this. This is in Ward 3. This development has been there 20-plus years. Part of what I deem to be a conditional use would be the plight of the owner due to unique circumstances, which is a true assessment, but I believe the unique circumstances were the overdevelopment of this lot to begin with. So I don't think that you could cause your own, and I'm not saying this particular petitioner, but the development at hand is the reason why we have these circumstances before us today. So it's tough for me to look at circumstances that were caused by what I would consider an overdevelopment of this particular parcel to approve a conditional use. This intersection here of Crestview and York, and outside this parking lot for the shopping center or strip mall, as well as at the actual intersection, is a relatively dangerous one. There have been trucks and vehicles going over the curb line of Crestview and York, which I was able to express to the committee at the last committee meeting. Line of sight, I'm not saying it would be negated in this instance if this pylon sign goes in at this intersection, but it would definitely be more of a challenge. And I do have concerns for that in particular, which is a part of the zoning code does address that, and it does meet the requirements of above 8 feet tall. But with the circumstances of cars being parked here, and then on top of that, the sign being put there, I think with those additional circumstances, you're really limiting the line of sight, as they call it here, the obstruction of sight triangles prohibited. So my biggest issue here is the pylon sign of New York and Crestview. I do want to thank the petitioner for moving the ground sign. I don't have any issue with the ground sign on the south side, or being proposed for the south side of the property. I did also have an issue with the ground sign on the north side of the property. Due to the fact that they moved it, it is more aesthetically pleasing, is at least at this time to some degree hidden from the residential area, from the current trees that are located there. To me, that's more acceptable. But I can't be in favor with this due to the circumstances of potentially, and I know it's potential, but with cars are going to be parked, as in the photo from the petitioner, there's already a pickup truck that's shown there, which already inhibits the line of sight. Where this is being proposed would additionally, in my view, obstruct the line of sight, which is very, very much a concern of myself as well. The one thing that I would like to ask to the committee, if I may, Mr. Mayor, is this is a sign on York Road for businesses that reside on Michigan Avenue. I don't recollect that happening in the past, and I tried to find something in our zoning code that says that's something that's allowed or not allowed. If the committee happens to know, or the city manager for that matter, or the city attorney, if I can get an answer for that, I would appreciate it as well.
Thank you, Alderman Brown. Any other discussion? Alderman Rose?
Thank you, Your Honor. Indeed, this project is in the 3rd Ward. To give you a little history on this project was actually built in 1989, long before anyone on this city council, even myself, happened to be on the council and made decisions about it. However, I was aware it's not longer than I've lived in the 3rd Ward. This development it was not controversial per se when this was put up. One of the things, if you look at this particular development, you will see that majority of businesses there, it was really meant to service the neighborhood. And it has struggled. It's had offices, but it has really local businesses, restaurants, a variety of other kinds of things that really service local residents in really that neighborhood. I won't pussyfoot around it. I actually was a member of the committee who thought that sign was really ugly. I thought it was ugly as proposed. I thought it was insulting to the neighborhood. Let's just put up something that's ugly and that's just fine. I did push along, and I was pleased to know that other committee members were willing to say you need to go back and change that sign. Am I happy with that sign? Not particularly. I think, though, that they did make some effort to do that. But I think the real issue is this development has struggled by lack of signage. And I think that that's a serious issue for the folks in that neighborhood. I think that when you have a lack of signage that directs people there, what you have are businesses that come and go, and it does not serve its need for those folks in the neighborhood. So I look forward to this sign really being an assistance to the people who live in that neighborhood and who live in the 3rd Ward. My second objection to this was the positioning of it. I have a basic principle, I've said it over and over and over again. When commercial abuts residential, it is, from my perspective, it's the responsibility of the commercial entity to go the extra mile. I'm pleased to say they did that. There's only one resident who could view that sign as it was originally proposed. It has since been pushed so that that resident will not see that. That's clear. This development could have signage on Michigan Avenue. And let me just tell you, a lot of folks in that neighborhood would be adversely affected by that. I think this is a good compromise between really the need to keep this particular commercial establishment vital for the people of the Third Ward, for the people in the neighborhood of the Third Ward, and protect those who live around it from intrusiveness of commercial signage into their neighborhood, into their neighborhood gatherings, parties, etc. I think that it is good. Would I like to see a different sign? You bet I would, but I think this is a case where I think it's good enough. This particular development, early on, the biggest problem with it, is it overdeveloped? That's, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I don't think it's overdeveloped myself. I think one of the problems for this was always going to be, the real discussion on this was, how are trucks going to get in there off of Crestview and make that turn to do delivery? It's difficult for those businesses. What we have is, as a result, we have more service-oriented businesses and businesses that are served by smaller vehicles as opposed to large trucks. So I would encourage us really to support this. I consider that a vote for supporting this is a vote for supporting the neighborhood, is a vote for really keeping the commercial viability of the Third Ward, and it serves as, it's really a service to the folks in that neighborhood. And I would urge all of you to support this.
Thank you, Alderman. Well said. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I ask Clerk Spencer to call the roll, please.
Morley.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Rose.
Aye.
Graham.
No.
Hipskin.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Nybo.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gudenkauf.
Aye.
Pezza.
Aye.
Shea.
Aye.
13 ayes, 1 nays.
13 ayes, 1 nay. The report passes. I also would like to add that I think that was an excellent decision, and also the gentleman that parks his truck on the corner, by the way, probably has the best Italian cookies in Elmhurst, does it because he's actually located on the backside of that mall. I think that truck will disappear. Line of sight will be much better. And if you ever want some really good Italian cookies, take it from somebody that had a grandma that made them all the time, stop over there. Shop Elmhurst. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item U. It's an ordinance. Clerk Spencer, please read the ordinance, please.
An ordinance to amend Article 7 entitled Stopping, Standing, and Parking of Chapter 44 entitled Motor Vehicles and Traffic of the Municipal Code of the City of Elmhurst, Illinois. Restricted parking during York High School football games on Hillside Avenue, Fairfield Avenue, Hawthorne Avenue, Berkeley Avenue, Surf Street, and Eggleston Avenue.
And at this time, I ask for a motion and a second on the ordinance, please. Alderman Wagner and Alderman Pezza with a second. In discussion. Alderman Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't pull the item, so I'm curious as to what Alderman Gudenkauf, who I believe did pull it, has a question on it. Happy to help.
Alderman Gudenkauf.
Yes, thank you. And I'll start by saying that I really sympathize with people in the neighborhood close to the football stadium during popular games, because it must be just so difficult for them to get around when their side streets are full of people who are attending the game. So I understand that. I have a very basic question. The ordinance says football games, but it doesn't specify which ones. Am I to assume that this covers freshman, sophomore, JV, and varsity football games? Are all of the football games a problem? And is it just the varsity? Was the intention just to prohibit parking during varsity games, which was my assumption? So I'd like to have that clarified, please.
And Alderman Chairman Wagner.
Yeah, it's very dangerous to assume anything nowadays, right? But I would like to defer to Assistant City Manager Kopp and see if he can help answer that. I would assume that it's all of the football games whenever they're played there. There will be no parking.
Okay. Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was my understanding, too, that it was all football games, but the reality is that the freshman and sophomore games don't generate the kind of traffic that would warrant parking in those neighborhoods, that the sufficient parking, whether it's at the high school, behind the field, or in the church lot, is adequate to handle. Really, we're talking about 8 nights a year, potentially more if they go into the playoffs, and the volume there is such that it is a problem. So it was always my understanding and confirmed that it was all football games.
Very good. And we encourage them to keep on winning as they did on Friday. Alderman Gutenkopf.
Yes, just a quick follow-up question. Does no other sport generate the parking pressure that football games generate? So is it just the varsity football games that are generating parking pressure?
Chairman Wagner, would you like to defer to the staff? Or?
Visually, yeah, I would say yes is the answer. I think the York varsity football team is the parking pressure.
Yeah, I think.
Alderman Pezza?
I would just add, I think that's the only one we've really heard complaints about. So at this point, that's, I think, why only that was addressed.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I ask Clerk Spencer to call the roll, please.
Wagner.
Aye.
Pezza.
Aye.
Shea.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Rose.
Aye.
Graham.
Aye.
Hipskin.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Nybo.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Morley.
Aye.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
Aye.
14 ayes, 0 nays.
14 ayes, 0 nays, the ordinance passes. And on to item number 6. It's a committee report. I'd ask Clerk Spencer to read the report, item A.
It is therefore the recommendation of the Public Works and Buildings Committee that the north 20 feet of Gladys Avenue right-of-way, as shown on the attached drawing, be vacated for $1,000 and miscellaneous city costs, and that the city attorney be authorized to prepare the appropriate documents for signature by the appropriate city officials. Respectfully submitted, Public Works and Buildings Committee, signed by Jim Kennedy, Chairman, and Chris Healy, unsigned by Michael Bram, Vice Chairman, and Pat Shea.
And at this time, I ask for a motion and a second to put the majority report on the floor. Alderman Kennedy, second by Alderman Healy. In discussion, Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This has been a long time in discussion. I think we talked about this 3 or 4 times from a Public Works standpoint. We were going to talk about this 2 weeks ago, and we asked to move it until tonight because at that time, Alderman Shea and Alderman Leader could not be here, and so given this is an issue related to the second ward, we asked to have this continued tonight. So thanks to everyone's patience up here and also to the Merediths who have been part of this process for a long time. Looking at this situation, I'm going to ask people just to look at the map that's on the back side of the majority report just to make a few points here. We're talking about 2 things. First of all, what's the price that the Merediths should pay? And then ultimately, what's the benefit that the city is going to realize by going ahead with this vacation? As you can see right now, the Merediths at 537 North Walnut have 2 40-foot lots, so an 80-foot parcel. They're looking to get a vacation of a 20-foot right-of-way, of which 10 feet of that, half of it, is going to remain as an easement, as there are sewer lines beneath that area. So any development that ever occurs in there will have to deal with that in some way, shape, or form to if there's going to be additional development. Looking at that 80-foot parcel, I want to just, if you take a view down, the lot just south of that is a 50-foot lot. Looking at the tax information related to those 2 areas, the 80-foot lot that the Merediths own has a land value based on what the assessor is saying of just about $59,000. The 50-foot parcel at 531 North Walnut has a land value of $56,000. So for 30 feet of frontage, the tax assessor has said that has a value of $3,000. So as we look at things, really the Merediths have 10 extra feet they're getting. So if you look at it in that way, $1,000 is probably a fair price for this. $3,000 for the 30 feet. You're really adding another 10 that they can use. $1,000 in my books makes sense. Now, in terms of the taxes and the benefits that go along with this, if you look at the parcel just to the east of the Meredith, you see that's another 80-foot frontage lot. That is a lot that was developed. There was new construction put on there, and that has a tax value right now. They pay taxes of about $12,000 a year right now. So in comparison to what the Meredith and the other parcels are much lower than that. When we look at the potential of going to what the Merediths have from 80 feet to 100 feet, you do ultimately have the benefit of two 50-foot lots that are buildable. From a resident standpoint, and from all of us in the city of Elmhurst, I think that's a good deal, because as we look at it, that means that ultimately those two pieces of property can be developed, and the average tax benefit of a new construction property on a 50-foot lot is $12,000. So we're really talking about, with two lots there, ultimately $24,000 a year that the city will realize from a tax benefit from all the taxing bodies, versus if it's developed as an 80-foot parcel, one house goes up there and it's $12,000. So we're talking about it's $24,000 versus $12,000 in perpetuity from now to the end of time for those things. That's a definite benefit to the people of Elmhurst. Those are people that are obviously paying taxes on their property, but are also going to be, there's going to be property taxes, there's going to be a lot of benefits that come to it. As we've heard already, this area was, at the time, was unincorporated DuPage County. So when this came in, it wasn't as if the city paid for this property. It came in, and the city has, over the years, since the Merediths have been there for almost 50 years now, the Merediths have cut the grass, they've repaired the roadway, they've done everything that's been asked of them and beyond. And so, given that fact, given that the city is going to realize a benefit from a taxation standpoint, again, $24,000 versus $12,000, I think this is the way that we ultimately need to go with this. Certainly, the Merediths will receive a benefit, no doubt, in the ultimate end game, should they desire to sell two 50-foot lots. But this isn't a situation where we're talking about the big bad developer that has been bantied about on this dais for years and years. This is somebody who's a 50-year resident who has invested in this town, has had kids in this town. They are growing up and have their families here, and so who better than a person that's invested in this town that should receive a benefit of a piece of land that really has no ultimate value to the city? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any other discussion? Alderman Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, everyone knows that I believe the city of Elmhurst property belongs to the residents of Elmhurst and has value. But only one other time when I felt it was justified, I voted to give property away, and that was because I felt they had been paying taxes on it for 20 years. Just adding on to Alderman Kennedy's, I'm not going to reiterate anything. I just want to add that Mr. Meredith, for 50 years, has maintained the property in question because he was asked to, along with the city's street next to it, filling potholes and graveling the edges. He just spent another $1,000 repairing the street for winter, $1,000 the city didn't have to spend their money on. The amount of money he has saved the city of Elmhurst over 50 years, I think, more than covers the amount asked for in the minority report, so I am supporting the majority report.
Thank you, Alderman Shea. Alderman Rose?
I just have a clarification, since this always comes up for the city attorney, which is to pass this report, we don't require a supermajority, just a simple majority for this. Can we just get a clarification?
We'll confirm that. I believe it is a simple because it is a report. City Attorney Storino, is that correct?
Yes, Alderman Rose has said it accurately. It will take 11 votes of the aldermen holding office when the ordinance comes before you in 2 weeks. But tonight, it's just a report, and all it would need would be a simple majority.
Thank you, I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you for the point of clarification, Alderman. And Alderman Mulliner?
Yeah, I too support this report. I mean, actually, I don't. I would give it away for zero because he's been maintaining the property for the last 50 years. And if I do the math, when I've been mowing my lawn and I pay for somebody to mow a piece of property that I have, within 3 years, that $1,000, I would have to pay it as a city. So, I mean, I would give it away for zero if it were my choice because he's been maintaining it for us as a city. But as the report comes forward, you know, the $1,000 I'm fine with.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm pleased to follow Alderman Mulliner in that I agree, and I said as such in the committee that I didn't want to take the 1,000, but in order to achieve a majority report, they offered 1,000, and all right, we'll take it. Just a few extra points, and I'm not going to reiterate what Alderman Kennedy said, but a couple things I'd like to point out. First, specifically, the policy for vacating city right-of-way. I think we all like things black and white. I know I do. I know that being up here almost 2 years now, many things aren't black and white, many things are gray. And I think this policy accounted for that. And I'm reading directly from the policy now. This policy is designed to provide a framework to evaluate a vacation request, but does not mandate that the committee assign a charge. So while I respect the minority report and Alderman Bram's adherence to the policy, I respect that. But I think in this case, I think to assign a charge is the wrong thing to do for the reasons stated. The reason I feel fairly strongly about this is the burden. If we hold fast and ask for a certain amount, where does that burden fall? I look at the property, 80 to 100 feet. At some point, that property is probably going to get subdivided, sold. So assuming that's the case, where does the burden fall? If we were to charge them 1,000, 9,000, 10,000, what have you, I don't see any other way other than the burden falling upon Mr. Meredith. Whether it's a developer, a home builder, what have you, if we grant this vacancy or this vacation, is going to, when they approach Mr. Meredith to buy the property, they are surely going to use the fact that they would have to invest. City staff recommended or suggested, it was ballpark, you know, no hard facts, roughly in the area of $13,000 to move the pipe. Now that's off my recollection. I might be off, but it's ballpark. So now Mr. Meredith is going to try to sell this property if he were to choose to sell this property. And the first thing somebody's going to do is say, well, I can't give you market value because if I do anything with it, I'm going to have to invest $13,000 just to move the pipe, assuming the city will let me do it. Assuming the city then grants the authority to do that. Alderman Shea tells me that number is 15 to 20,000. So they will use that against Mr. Meredith in his argument, in the negotiation. And then what is the value of that land? Let's assume that it's 100 feet. The value of the land is the value of the land. The developer builder is not going to go to Mr. Meredith and say, oh, you had to pay the city $10,000? I'm willing to up that my amount by $10,000 to, no, we all know that. That's silly. So who loses that money? Where does that burden fall? It falls right there. And I am unwilling to pass, I'm willing to accept 1,000. I'm more willing to say nothing because the burden of whatever we charge for that piece of property falls on that man. And for the time invested and the length he's had it, I'm just not willing to do that. So I am obviously supporting the majority report.
Thank you, Alderman. Any other discussion? Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to support the majority report with the minority report.
Substitute.
Sorry. What did I say?
Support.
Support.
Substitute.
It's already late. I would like to substitute the majority report with the minority report.
No, the minority report for the majority.
Okay, I can't say anything right this evening. What Alderman Rose said.
Oh, mark that down for history.
You don't have to, it's right up there.
Yeah, right. Okay, I would have to say motion fails for lack of a second.
Does it have to have a second?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
It's a motion.
And then what? Okay, whatever.
Would you like to second that motion, Alderman
Sure.
Pezza? Okay. So we have a motion and a second to substitute, minority for majority. Discussion? Alderman Nybo?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll chime in on this one. You know, I've been wrongfully criticized for talking about the significance of a handshake in negotiating a deal from this dais. I think that's wrongfully criticized because I think there is significance to his handshake. I think it means something, getting a deal done. Your word, you know, truth, honesty. Ironically, of every person I've quoted from this dais, the person I've done the most has been Tom Marcucci. And I know, Steve, you were there when we were talking about it. You know, getting things done. And Tom said something, the mayor, said something that really stuck with me, which was, when you're moving forward on a deal and you're trying to get something done, and I know this quote may come back to bite me, but I'm going to say it anyways. You can't worry about every nickel on the table. And what's the significance of that? Of course, every nickel of taxpayer money is important, and we're going to guard it. However, when you're negotiating a deal and you're trying to get something done, you can't fret about the small stuff. You can't worry about every triviality. You can't dive into every detail if it's going to risk the deal going forward. You know, and I'm looking at the dais, and I'm looking at Alderman Leader, and I'm looking at Alderman York, I'm looking at Alderman Hipskin, and I think all you guys would agree that if it's going to risk having the deal go forward, sometimes you just can't sweat the small stuff. I think it's important that we get paid for something on these. I've always said that it's important that we get something. Others think it's important, it's not important, that we get anything. Alderman Healy would take 0. Alderman Mulliner would take 0. I told Alderman Kennedy, you know what, 1,000 seems really low to me. And you know what, it still does. It doesn't seem like the amount of money that I would pick, that I would sell this for. But then a couple things. Alderman Kennedy, I did say Alderman Kennedy, right? I shared my concern with you.
You did.
Alderman Kennedy can be very persuasive, let me tell you, because he persuaded me. First of all, you know, the figures that he quotes here, if there's really a $3,000 difference in the assessed valuation of the property when you subtract 4,500 in square foot from the property, so if I'm doing my math correctly, you get a $3,000 reduction from 59 to 56 when you go from 12,000 square feet to 7,500 square feet.
Point of order. I'm not sure. I thought we were discussing whether or not we wanted to substitute. Is that what we're discussing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're discussing.
Okay, I just wasn't clear on that.
Well, yeah, because the essence of the minority report says we should take $10,000, and the majority report says $1,000. And so I sat there, and I said, you know, I'm somewhere in between. I think it should probably be $3,000 or $4,000. But you know what? If I vote to say I disagree with $1,000, there's a risk that we're not going to get anything, because we may not get a report, we may not get an ordinance, or we might go to an amount of money that we present to Mr. Meredith, and he says, you know what? Go pound sand. I don't want to do this at all. So I think we're at a point where we're trying to find the best deal for the taxpayers. We're trying to do the best with this situation. And what's the best that we can do in this situation, given the circumstances? I think it's to get something. It may not be exactly what I would want, but it's something. And so in the same way that Alderman Mulliner is willing to support a report that may not be exactly what he would want, and same with Alderman Healy, it's not exactly what he would want or what he would require. Well, it's not what I would require either. I'd require a higher amount. But we're getting something, and I think we're going to move this deal forward. And so I don't want to leave every nickel on the table. I'm willing to support the majority report, which means I will oppose, Alderman Pezza, the motion to substitute.
Very good. Any other discussion? All right, we'll put the motion to substitute on the roll call vote, please.
We're substituting the majority.
The majority.
I mean, I'm
minority
getting
for the majority.
Michael Bram speak. The minority for the majority. Okay. Bram.
Aye.
Pezza.
Aye.
Shea.
No.
Leader.
Nay.
Rose.
No.
Hipskin.
No.
York.
No.
Nybo.
No.
Healy.
No.
Morley.
No.
Kennedy.
No.
Mulliner.
No.
Wagner.
No.
Oh, missed one.
One more. Gutenkopf.
Yes.
Yes. Three ayes. Oh, gosh, wait a minute.
11 noes.
11 nays.
3 ayes, 11 nays, the minority report fails. And now we go to the majority report. At this point, do we still need to discuss, or do you want to go right to Alderman? Before we go to the minority report, I would like to just add on the majority. Excuse me, on the majority report, on that vote, I would just like to add, ultimately, and I agree with the noes. Ultimately, who really loses in this situation is the kids, because if I do my math based on what Alderman Kennedy said, almost 70% of our tax dollars go to school funding here in Elmhurst. That's why I ran for mayor, driving the bus of economic development. It's $16,800. Currently, the property is bringing $3,500 for the schools. So we're talking a few dollars, and who's really losing ultimately are the kids. And if we're truly pro-education in this town, I think that I agree with the noes. Thank you.
Every year.
Every year. It's an annuity for the public schools in our community. So with that, I go back to the majority report. Alderman Pesley, you'd like to discuss?
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah.
What we are discussing here is a piece of developable, profitable, therefore valuable land owned by the Elmhurst taxpayers, not just us, the Elmhurst taxpayers, the people that we're elected to represent the best interests of their dollars. We are supposed to be making decisions not based on if it were our property, but based on representing all the taxpayers. That being said, I did market research. According to fair market value comparables of buildable residential land in the area where this property sits, the average lot sells for $20 to $23 a square foot. Based on that fact, this 3,000 square foot piece is worth $60,000 in market value in today's market as part of the buildable parcel. That's a fact. It's a fact from statistics. Based on the assessed value, with the senior exemption taken into consideration, comparing it to the adjacent lot of the neighboring property, that's $13.50 a square foot, which values it at $40,500 as part of the buildable parcel. Once this land is owned by the neighbor, it can be subdivided into a 50 by 150 buildable, profitable lot, which fair market value in today's market would be $150,000. Taxpayer-owned land. So basically, we're telling the taxpayers, the owners of this land, that the city needs revenue and we want to raise their taxes again next year. Yet here we are saying we want to give away their land that's valuable and profitable for pretty much nothing, $1,000. When you take into consideration, if you do a spreadsheet, line item costs, deferred maintenance, absolutely, I would credit the potential buyer with all of that. Potential profit to the seller, the taxpayers, developable land, therefore taxable. Obviously, no, the price is not $60,000 and it's not even $40,000. It's a number less. But for us to arbitrarily pick a number as low as $1,000 means that we are willing to take a loss on behalf of the taxpayers for the land they own that has value and is profitable, and basically give their land away. I absolutely cannot support this giveaway. And just a reminder, I thought of it as the song goes, it is the land of the free, not the land for free. And I'm sorry, that land has value. I do not believe in giving away land, especially when there is other people involved, and that's being the taxpayers who are the stakeholders of this property. So I cannot support this.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Alderman Pezza and I share the same sentiments, so I don't want to repeat much of what she stated already, and very well said. Since I did not have a chance to speak other than attempting to substitute the two reports, I wanted to kind of place my feelings in regards to the policy and the importance of the policy, as well as the dollar figure. The biggest thing I want to stress in regards to the dollar figure is this is an asset. This is an asset to the city of Elmhurst. When we get rid of older police vehicles, we auction them off because they're an asset. We would like to see some return on the asset that we have, that the city of Elmhurst residents have. This is a city of Elmhurst residents' asset. It's not my asset. It's not, everybody here on the diocese. It's the city of Elmhurst residents as a whole. So I have concerns over giving away land in any circumstance, let alone one that allows for a buildable lot. I archived some of the discussions from the multiple years we had about vacating right-of-ways. It is relatively thin if you don't consider that this is the summary of what was done over years of deliberation by the city council. They did a history of what was done before, what the circumstances were done in each and every single case. That is how this policy was developed. This policy, as Alderman Healy has stated, you don't have to follow, and it states it in here, you don't have to charge anything, but due to the great deliberation that has been done in the past, this is something to establish a working position for various circumstances when it comes to right-of-way vacation. I take that very seriously, as I spoke about before, about procedure. That is something that I value. There was time well spent, and I appreciate that time developing this policy. It states the committee also determined that the starting point of any discussions regarding the value of a proposed vacated piece of property would be 50% of the EAV land only times the square footage of the parcel to be vacated, starting and looking at other factors, one of which being a buildable lot. The figure that I proposed was $10,066, and this is 75% of the equalized assessed value for this parcel. So I cannot support this minority report. I am not sure on where the $1,000 figure came from. As I've stated in the past, I'm an engineer. I like to go on facts. Yes, there's some areas of gray in the various issues that we discuss here on the dais, but there's a policy in place that I would I prefer to follow, and I am following. I encourage everybody on this dais to at least take it into consideration, if not follow what has been stated before us in previous discussions on this very controversial topic. Again, I just want to leave you with that last statement. This is a city asset. This asset will potentially allow the petitioner to create 2 buildable lots. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Alderman Leader, and then I'm going to go to Alderman Healy as a follow-up. Alderman Leader.
I want us to remember that the property in question originally cost the city nothing, not 1 penny. The minority report requests Mr. Meredith to pay $10,666. I don't believe that the city of Elmhurst should be in the business of making such an excessive and disproportionate profit at the expense of an Elmhurst taxpayer of 50 years. Now, each case involving a right-of-way vacation is different and must be judged on its individual merits. And we must always be bound by the principles of common sense, common decency, compassion, and fairness. And I would ask each of you around this dais to examine your conscience and vote accordingly. I would also ask you to remember the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Thank you.
Thanks, Alderman Leader. Very well said. Alderman Rose, and then I'll go Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Your Honor. I actually agree with mostly everything Alderman Kennedy has said, except I don't think we want to make a decision based on whether we think it's the bad, evil developers or the good citizen. Let me just tell you, if a developer wanted this, I don't have any trouble with that whatsoever. I think that's, I would argue with demonizing developers in this sense. I do agree with Alderman Healy that, yeah, things are never so black and white. Policy is mutable. Alderman Bram says that. The law is a little more difficult to change. Policy is simply our guideline into that. This property, Alderman Pezza says it's potential. It's potential, potential, potential. I'm going to quote her words because I think they are important. It becomes valuable if added to a subdivided piece of property. We don't know what this guy's going to do. We don't know what Mr. Mayor, is he going to subdivide it or not? I don't know. You can say, oh yeah, I know for sure he's going to do that. I don't know if he's going to do that or not. That's up to him. The reality is, right now, not even that we paid no money for it before, right now, this piece of land gives nothing to the city. We don't get anything from it. It's just sitting, in fact, it's costing us money. Its potential value is actually getting it off the public rolls, that it's in getting it into private hands. I agree with Alderman Pezza, it becomes valuable then, but we have no control over that. It becomes valuable as taxable property. We now will get taxes off of this. I think Mr. Meredith was a great guy to do this on a handshake with a former mayor. That's great. He may be a good guy, maybe a bad guy. What's important is I actually, too, was elected to represent the taxpayers of this city, and the best way I can do that is by putting this piece of property on the tax rolls. And I absolutely strongly support this. I think this is a good idea. Let's get it off the public rolls. Let's start letting this piece of property work for the taxpayers. You know, there's some parables in Scripture about letting your assets sit and do nothing, or letting your assets work for you. And I'll tell you, I think the best way we can get this asset to work for us is put it in private hands and let's let the taxpayers earn tax money from it, which is what we should do. So I would support this.
Very good. Alderman Gutenkopf.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, it occurs to me that we passed a policy on vacating land just to avoid having this discussion reiterated every single time this issue comes before us. I'm really frustrated that we go to a lot of trouble to pass policies, to give ourselves guidelines. Sure, we can say it's a policy. We're not bound by a policy. We can throw it out the window anytime we want. Here we go again. I really am disturbed that we go to all the trouble of spending countless hours at committee level and at council level writing a policy only to decide it's not convenient for us to follow it, so we're not going to. And I find that we're doing it again. Here we are, talking about some guidelines we've established that give us enough room to engage in discussion, but are supposed to guide our behavior. And I don't see any evidence in the majority report that the guidelines, that the policy ever came into that discussion. Alderman Pezza spelled out very clearly how that policy could have been used to establish a potential value, and from that point to enter into negotiations with the potential purchaser of a property. I find that yet, instead of doing that, we're succumbing to emotion. We feel like this person's going to do us a big favor, and they may be, has absolutely no value judgment on the potential purchaser. The question here is really, what are we doing as a city council, and how are we behaving? I'd like to just point out a couple of things. First of all, I can never begin to presume that I would know what the purchaser of a property will do with that property if they don't want to tell us. Who in their right mind would say, sure, I want to buy this property from you for like nothing, but then I'm going to subdivide it and make a whole bunch of money off of it? Who's going to tell us that? Why would anybody do that? I wouldn't do that, because all of a sudden the price of that property is going to shoot up through the ceiling. So whether or not this person might or might not subdivide the property should be completely outside the discussions that we have about the basic value, which should be based on, what does the policy say? The equalized assessed value, and to begin negotiation at 50% of that. Well, we have a number provided by someone who is a professional in real estate, who knows how to research. We have a contractor who works for the city who does assessments of properties, but we didn't go to him to ask us to provide a number. We haven't done any of that. We just said, okay, sounds good. Okay, let's go for that. We make a basic assumption here at the City Council that because we didn't pay for the land, we don't have to worry about, we have no financial obligation for it. Well, here's a little history lesson. Most of the city of Elmhurst was acquired through annexation. We didn't go out and say, I want to buy that farm, I'm going to buy that farm, I'm going to, go over there and build the city that way. We annexed in land often because somebody owned the land, said, I want to be part of the city because I want city services. So most cities acquire land that way. Most cities don't go out and buy it. So to say that we got the land for free really is outside the discussion. It doesn't matter. It doesn't excuse us from having an obligation to the taxpayers for the land that we do manage. So I can't buy the argument that we got it for free, and I can't buy the argument that we're really squishy and soft about this, so we feel comfortable, we feel really good about this person, we're going to just give it to them. I think we set up policy, and we should follow the policy, and I don't really see any evidence of that. So because of all of these reasons, I can't support this majority report. I just don't see hard calculations and evidence of discussion back and forth to arrive at that number. And I'm not comfortable with it, so I'm not going to support it.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I hear this want of those against this to wrap themselves in the policy. And that policy clearly states that we don't have to assign a charge. So if you're willing to wrap yourself in the policy, wrap yourself in the entire policy. I'm not going to assign what people are thinking, what their rationale is. I'm not sure I know what squishy means, but I'm not willing to assign that to anybody. Specific to Alderman Pez's points, and I think they're good ones, and I understand that that is the competing point of view, if you will. But there's some flaws in that argument, in Alderman Pez's points. First, as far as the assessed value, and I think Alderman Rowe stated it well, this land only has assessed value if it's on the tax rolls. It's not. So if I'm going to do what Alderman Gutenkopf says and not assume what the owner is going to do to it, what's my job as an alderman? To get it on the tax rolls, because then it's on the tax rolls. So when Alderman Pez mentions that the EAV is this, and I apologize, I don't remember what the exact figure was, that's only true if it's on the tax rolls, and it's not. As for the other figures, there was fair market value there was one example of if it was part of the senior exemption, one if it wasn't. But there was a little phrase, and Alderman Rose touched on this too, that Alderman Pez had to throw in there. If part of a buildable lot. It's not. So to assign a $40,000 or a $60,000 value to it is pure fantasy. So how does this, nuts and bolts, how does this land have value to the city? If I'm not going to assume what the Merediths are going to do with the property. It's on the tax rolls where somebody is taxed for it. That is the only way that property generates value for the city. Now, if it's subdivided and then it gets onto the tax rolls, well, then the tax assessments double. And Alderman Kennedy went through that. So we can go back and forth about policy and squishiness and what have you. The facts are that land is not valuable to us or taxpayers until it's on the city on tax rolls.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I approve. I support the majority report wholeheartedly. I think there's a fact here, Alderman Leader and Alderman Rose pointed out. I would say that Alderman Rose probably did a little bit clearer job and did a much better job than I'm going to do right now. But I will say that, there's a lot of people that can't see the forest through the trees here, and the forest happens to be what's the right thing to do. It's been taking care of the property for 50 years. I mean, we can get bogged down in policy, and we can get bogged down in a lot of different things here. But I just think that it's the right thing to do. The majority report supports the right thing to do, and I'd like to call the question.
Very good. Question is called. It is Clerk Spencer to call the roll, please.
I object.
Object.
Do we vote on?
Object meaning challenging the ruling from the chair.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we vote?
More discussion that needs be, or you can vote on the challenge to the chair.
We'll put the vote on the challenge to the chair to the clerk. Clerk Spencer, if you call the roll on the challenge, please.
Was that a motion?
It was just a challenge.
Call the question.
You could do it by ayes and nays if you think you can get it that way, or
the
I guess I'll
clarification.
call on Wagner first.
Real quick here, we're going to clarify this. The call the question was called by Alderman Wagner. There was a challenge by Alderman Gutenkopf with a second from Alderman Brahm. So we could probably do this by voice vote, to be honest with you.
Point of order?
Yes.
The proper thing to do is, if the question is challenged, ask for a second. Then you have a motion on the floor for the call of question.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it's a supermajority actually has to be in favor of it. So to follow Roberts, there's a motion on the floor to call the question. It needs a second. The challenge actually is out of order.
Okay. I appreciate the clarification. We have a second by Alderman Leader on the...
But I'm going to go further. What is a yes vote and what is a no vote in this case? Because it's now getting complicated and convoluted.
I think we're looking for a second on the call to question first. Do we have a second on the call to question? I think we have a lot of seconds there. Alderman Rose with a second on the call to question. Okay. And that would need a supermajority. Is that correct? Okay.
No, but there's going to be a challenge.
Or a simple majority.
Challenge. Now there's a challenge.
Now there's a challenge. We have a motion and a second on the call to question.
Now there's a challenge.
Now there's a challenge on the call to question. That would require a supermajority vote to...
But there's not a challenge yet.
Okay.
Because we just got the second. Now we need a challenge.
Okay. Would you still like to challenge Alderman Gutenkopf?
No, what I was trying to do was to prevent you from going directly into the motion, into the vote on the report. We couldn't do that.
If that's what you want to do and still have discussion, that the way to do that is to challenge the ruling
of the chair.
So we're at the second.
Okay, so we have the second on the call to question.
No.
And we have a challenge. And
no, we don't. We don't have a challenge.
We don't have a challenge.
We got the second. Now we need a challenge. Do you want a challenge?
Are you still challenging Alderman Gutenkopf?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. She was challenging.
Does she need a second?
Does she need a second, City Attorney Storino? No.
Okay.
We need to vote on the question. We have to vote on the question.
All we need to do is vote on the calling of the question. That's all we need to do. We've got a motion on the floor and a second, and the motion is to call the question. The second is to call the question. All we need to do is call a vote on calling the question.
Voice.
In the supermajority.
I believe it's a supermajority requirement.
I don't have the Roberts rules here.
I do.
It's 3/4.
It requires a second and two-thirds vote.
On call the question?
Of?
For the motion to pass.
No, the corporate authorities.
Oh, doesn't say. At least this portion.
Two-thirds of 15.
Two-thirds of 15. Okay.
I can do that in our head. That's 10.
Right. So we need 10 votes basically to uphold the call to question. Is that correct, City Attorney Storino? Okay. Clerk Spencer, would you like to call the roll, please? This is on
Wagner.
calling the question.
Right. Wagner.
Aye.
Rose.
Aye.
Graham.
No.
Hipskin.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Nybo.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Morley.
No.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Mulliner.
No.
Gutenkopf.
No.
Pezza.
No.
Shea.
No.
Leader.
Aye.
Did I get everybody? I think I got everyone. 8 ayes and 6 nays.
8 ayes, 6 nays.
Call the question fails.
Call the question fails. Okay. We can continue discussion.
Wait a minute.
All right. Who would like to discuss?
I had my hand up, but I don't remember why.
Alderman Brown, you remember what you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, a lot of confusion here.
Not on my name. Alderman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to kind of revisit.
Order, could I just ask who the nays were? I don't believe that is a correct vote. Can I just ask who?
Sure. Nays on that.
Okay, then I was incorrect. I got it. I'm just, the city clerk looks, I just want to make sure it's correct. You're confident in that?
Yeah.
On the vote?
6. Yeah.
8 ayes, 6 nays.
Right.
I'm just going
I
over
withdraw
it
my
again.
point of order.
Alderman Brown. Sorry.
Thank you. It's just one of those evenings, it seems. There's only a couple things that I want to add to the discussion. One, I said it in committee meeting, and I want to say it publicly to the petitioner and the petitioner's family, et cetera. I do appreciate the due diligence they've had over this time. I think this discussion started in January of 2010, at least according to my record. So I do appreciate the patience there, and I wanted to publicly make that statement because there's been some concern over the duration and the time frame. I also want to thank the petitioner from the standpoint of any maintenance that they may have done over this course of time is appreciated, albeit not needed, but it is appreciated. And that curtails into my last really statement of the evening on this issue is my view on this issue is voting on what the policy states compared to voting what I deem to be the emotional issue. I think that, in all due respect, there's been a lot of good things by the petitioner has stated. There's been deals struck in the past, et cetera, and I'm not negating that. But as at least my role, what I view my role to be, is to make a decision without the emotional aspect of what may or may have not been done or promised in the past. I think that is the key here from my perspective, and that's why the policy that has been deliberated for years before a policy was created is so very important in this discussion. The importance of putting this piece of property on the tax rolls or not, obviously I would like to see it there as well, but I don't think that totally negates the fact that it could be done by requesting what I would deem to be a valued price for this asset of the city of Elmhurst. As Alderman Gutenkopf has stated, I'm not sure where the $1,000 figure came from, and I still, as of tonight, am not aware of that. And I think that we need some basis to be, when we decide to free up this asset to, in this case, the particular petitioner. So overall, I appreciate everything that's been done in the past, but I can't I can't make my decisions per emotion or what may or may not have been promised. I need to review what has been the policy for over a year and a half now, and therefore I cannot support the majority report. Over this time, there hasn't been any request by any member of the City Council to revise the policy, concerns over the policy during this deliberation or prior to. So I think that actually holds some water from the standpoint of the positive effects that the policy has served us in past deliberations, which I think has been 2 or 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Rose.
I just say, I absolutely share Alderman Gutenkopf's frustration about making policy and then, but the reality is that's political life. That's what happens. Policy changes. It's easy to say we haven't, in a year and a half, this has been a controversial policy for a long period of time. A year and a half it was this, 5 years ago it was different, 15 years ago it was different. Policy is not law. It just isn't. So but I share the frustration with that. For example, we had a policy on sidewalks. I didn't agree with that. I still don't agree with it. But that's a policy, and when it comes up again, I'm not going to vote according to that. So that's just life. But I think that I would love us to come to some closure for this. If there's other arguments, I'll listen to them. But I think we should move on with this, and I absolutely support the majority report. I'd like us to move on.
Thank you. I think we've heard from everybody. At this time, I ask Clerk Spencer to call the roll, please.
Kennedy.
Aye.
Healy.
Aye.
Morley.
Aye.
Mulliner.
Aye.
Wagner.
Aye.
Gutenkopf.
No.
Heza.
No.
Shea.
Aye.
Leader.
Aye.
Rose.
Aye.
Bram.
No.
Hipskin.
Aye.
York.
Aye.
Nybo.
Aye.
Okay, 11 ayes and 3 nays.
11 ayes, 3 nays. The majority report passes. And to item number 7, reports and recommendations of appointed and elected officials. Updates from myself. Couple short things. If some people saw a week or so ago, myself and some of the mayors, surrounding mayors, and also county officials, both from DuPage County, Cook County, assembled a little task force to do a press conference regarding the denial from FEMA to reimburse municipalities, which unfortunately was denied to Elmhurst and all the other surrounding communities. We are trying for an appeal on that. The formula in which they used to figure reimbursement for the state is about $15 million based on our population. Unfortunately, because Cook County and DuPage County are densely populated, the threshold in Cook County alone is $17 million, and in DuPage County is $5 million, which seems kind of weird, because why would two counties that are made up of the state have a higher threshold? It's based on population. So we're trying to do what we can to appeal this. The request from both DuPage and Cook County was well over $30 million, and many millions were disallowed for various reasons. But the mayors, the county officials are working hard to hopefully get reimbursement, and we're doing everything we can to appeal to state officials as well as our federal officials to hopefully see to that happening. Also wanted to mention the extension on FEMA is up until November 17th, so there's still a little bit of time. If you haven't gotten an application in, get it in. We have seen a lot of reimbursement to our local residents. In the press conference, I said specifically, we thank FEMA for their help with our residents. Now it's time for them to step up and reimburse the municipalities for their overtime, for their damage to their vehicles, to all the assistance in that effort. Many municipalities incurred expenses. Village of Bellwood actually lost 20 squad cars, and the mayor thanked us for letting him use an Elmhurst squad or two, and all the other municipalities around Bellwood pitched in while they're dealing with their issues. City of Westchester, Village of Westchester, I believe, had over $2 million in expenses. Fortunately, we were not nearly of those dollars, but we would like to see the probably hundreds of thousands that Elmhurst had to accrue and expend reimbursed, and we will continue that effort to make that happen. And that's it for me. I would look to item B, status of progress on Stormwater Comprehensive Plan. City Manager Borchert would give us a report on that, please.
Just a quick update for the council and community and task force. As reported last week, the city did receive 6 very significant submittals of interest from qualified teams indicating their interest to compete for the city's selection as the comprehensive planning consulting engineering firm. We have scanned all of those very thorough submittals. The selection committee, which again is the mayor, the Public Works Chairman, Jim Kennedy, Assistant Manager Kopp, Director of Public Works Hughes, and City Engineer Corey Taberry. Those 5 individuals are the selection committee. My understanding is the mayor will convene a meeting of that group in the very near future to begin to sort through those 6 proposals, weaning them down through the qualification-based selection process to a smaller number, and then bringing to the Public Works Committee and the City Council one firm, ultimately one firm, after input from the council and input from the task force as to what firm would be best judged to be most successful in serving the community going forward, to allow the City Council and the task force and the community to participate and oversee or help oversee that process. Again, all of the submittals have been posted, I think, by the end of today on the city website, and that will allow for the technical review committee to make postings on the website for everybody's understanding. In the meantime, the city staff continues to work forward with the Burke firm on the items that have been identified as a priority to go forward prior to the consultant being selected for the comprehensive plan. We anticipate a week from tonight the 3rd education workshop, that being on the sanitary sewer system, being completed. And in addition, between now and the end of the week, we anticipate a Burke submittal on their analysis of a number of items that were part of their interim report, which included the Sailor and Jackson lift station, the force main from that lift station, the Jackson storm station, and power at the Harrison station. The Burke group has completed their work. They're preparing their final report, submitting that. We anticipate by the end of the week that'll be forwarded to the Public Works Committee. And just as a further assistance, we made a photocopy of the August 3rd memorandum of priorities 1 and 2, along with the status report of actions completed as of August 30th, and have now added a summary of action items showing revised notes through November 1st, 10 on the back of that earlier memo. I'll try to work on with the engineering group and public works group a little more helpful to discern and to sort out the timing of when these items have been completed, but there is now an updated as of revised date today, November 1st, 10, a summary of actions taken and status of items going forward. At this point, frankly, a lot of what is left to be done will be done by the ultimate consulting firm selected to do the comprehensive planning effort. Burke will continue doing their interim work. Again, we'll have a report on the sanitary stations and the lift stations at the south end of town by the end of the week. The remaining work is on the isolated drainage sub-areas that have experienced problems, which we're continuing to work on. In that regard, I think of positive note, one of the areas that had significant not over stream bank, but overland flooding was Washington Street. And in that area, under construction, new construction, a new permit was issued. A home is under construction on the block that was most significantly hit. Clearly that individual, that developer, that property owner believes in not only the community and the area and the neighborhood, but that block is a very valuable location to be. They have changed the elevation of their foundation. Understanding now in our public works group is setting foundation elevations at 1 foot above high flood levels. We've marked the areas that have experienced flooding, and new foundation elevations will be placed a foot above that, so that the new construction will have a much higher probability of being successful with their flood enhancing measures. So I've double-checked on that house under construction, that it has, again, been set with a proper elevation above the highest water level known to date on that area, and a serious investment is going forward on that block. So I think that shows faith in the block and faith in the community, and faith in our work going forward. And we'll continue to provide status reports and take all this knowledge that we're accumulating as we're going forward and put it to the most proper application for the long-term success of the community. Look forward to working again with the task force at a higher level now that we begin the process of selecting the consultant to help with the comprehensive planning effort. Any questions? If not, end of report.
Thank you, City Manager Borcher. Any questions for, oh, I'm sorry, Alderman Mulliner.
Just one. Do we have any further updates from ComEd? I know there was a meeting, but I don't know if there's been anything.
Yes.
Final.
ComEd did provide a draft of a PowerPoint which they would wish to provide to the whole entire community through a public meeting. They've asked for a little more time to upgrade the quality of that PowerPoint, and they will be then offering it to the community. I had thought we'd get it by the end of October. Obviously, we didn't get it. It's in the hands of Commonwealth Edison. We're working to get it before the end of November, or certainly before Thanksgiving, if at all possible. I think most of the work's been done on it. They're just trying to make it fresher and cleaner and more understandable for viewers.
Thank you. Very good. Anybody else? Questions? All righty. On to item 8, other business. Any other business? Anybody? Hearing none. On to item 9, announcements. Nobody? Oh, City Clerk Spencer.
I just wanted to remind everyone that tomorrow is Election Day, and if you are confused and don't know where you go to vote, your polling area, you can get on the DuPageElections.com website to find out, or if you aren't computer savvy, 630-407-5600.
Thank you, Clerk Spencer. I also want to bring up the Kickoff for Kids annual gala. I believe is coming up on November 19th at River Forest Country Club. It is their probably biggest fundraiser. Just an FYI, when we do our mayor for the day in the past, oh, excuse me, 28th? 20th. Okay, 20th. I stand corrected, 20th to Saturday then. And if you want to get further information, you can go to Kickoff for Kids, Google Kickoff for Kids Elmhurst, and they do have a website with all their information. Michael Spies is the president chairman, does a great job. But this year, they actually paid for the recipient of the mayor for the day and their mother to go to Washington. And in the last 2 years, because of funding, there hasn't been a nonprofit nor the city been able to support that. And when I had called up Mr. Lespiza, they were right there with dollars in hand to make sure that our mayor for the day had the experience of going to Washington as was done in the past. So a great organization, do a lot of great things in Elmhurst. They support local charities like ECAF and Ray Graham and many, many local organizations that support kids. So I would encourage everybody, it's a great time and it's a great cause. Please come out and support this group. Also, we had the victorious victory Friday for football, for the York Varsity football, and it has advanced them to the next level. I believe it's the Sweet 16, if I'm not mistaken, which puts them against, I believe, Naperville this coming Friday, Naperville North. So it's an away game, and I'm proud of our Dukes. I was on the sideline. I saw Alderman Wagner out there rooting them on as well, too. And I see one as well, so we got some
next Saturday, 2 o'clock at Plunkett Field.
Next Saturday, 2 o'clock at Plunkett Field. So a lot of good local teams doing great things. And volleyball, Alderman Healy.
Don't forget the York Dukes girls volleyball team. They won the York Regional and moving on to sectionals. They play tomorrow night.
Beautiful, beautiful.
And York cross country is going to state on Saturday too in Peoria.
That's right. That's right. Actually, the meet starts at 2 o'clock at Detweiler Park. The mayor will be out there cheering on his old team, and actually the coach called me up today to remind me of that great event. So they won sectionals this past weekend. Great team. We had so many things to, I think, celebrate in this town, and that's what Elmhurst is all about. So
I see women's volleyball too.
And I see women's volleyball.
I could be in trouble if I didn't. And I see cross-country is also.
That's right,
So
right.
we're
Yeah, and I heard the girls advanced as well, too, in cross-country for York. They're always kind of shadowed by the boys, but they always have a team that's in the top, typically top 5. Alderman Gutenkopf.
Yes, I hate to take us off sports, but the Elmhurst Historical Museum will be the beneficiary of a fundraiser by the Elmhurst Heritage Foundation on Thursday, November 18th. It's called Magic and Merlot, and it starts with a tour of the magic exhibit and then moves over to Wine and Vine for a special performance of Magic by Eugene Berger at 6:30. And you can get tickets by going to www.elmhurstheritagefoundation.org.
Very good. Any other announcements? Alderman Pezza.
One last announcement. This Friday evening is the Art at Night Food for Life, and the local artists are teaming up with some of our businesses. I know Glitch Gallery and Exner Studios and several other businesses in town will be open displaying art, and you are also supposed to bring food items for the food pantry. So it's a nice evening of wine and appetizers and art, and also doing good for some of these food pantries.
Very, very nice. All right. Anybody else for announcements? Hearing none, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn. Alderman Morley, second by Alderman Healy. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? We're adjourned.